Before we continue, understand this podcast is for adults only and refers to relationships and activities between adults which are voluntary and consensual. If you or anyone you know is being abused, coerced, or violently aggressed against, please reach out for help to the appropriate authorities. Hello and welcome. Gorean Voice, Episode 7, Slave Gruel, Diet, and Gore as an Aesthetic Practice. Thanks for tuning in again. The title of this episode is inspired by a forum post I came across last year. Its title was merely the word Gruel. The poster was soliciting advice on a nutritionally complete solution to making her Kajira dietary experience as authentic to the Gore books as possible. My own contribution to the discussion on the topic of slave gruel was an objection. Of course, I have nothing against feeding a woman from a trough, or having her eat without the benefit of utensils or even the use of her own hands. My objection to gruel and drinking one's food in general is that we moderns don't spend enough energy chewing things, and we are suffering from an epidemic of health problems that are right under our noses. We're uglier than we need to be, and our mandibles don't have enough room for our teeth anymore. We can barely breathe in our sleep and are getting poor quality rest on this account. For my part, I chew large volumes of xylitol gum for the exercise. I may look like a maniac while doing so, but I think it's helping my skull stay in the right shape. Which brings me about to the more general topic. Every meal is not merely a thing to stuff down one's esophagus to stave off hunger for one more day. It is an opportunity to savor a moment of olfactory pleasure. It is an opportunity to practice one's formal body posture. It is a chance to wear dining clothes and to enjoy good company. It can be part of a larger social event, a chance to unwind. It may be combined with some other entertainment, such as taking in some music, comedy, or dramatic performances. If you have young people in your charge, it is a teachable moment to help them learn how to dine with dignity and to cultivate cultivated habits, not least among them the habit of gratitude about the dinner table. For some people, such as myself, who engage in fasting and a performance-oriented diet, it is an opportunity to combine art with science. This, of course, goes much more than double strong for the cook and the server. Every aspect of the meal, from planning to preparation to presentation, and yes, even the swiftness of cleaning up afterwards, can be an exercise in grace, beauty, service, and thrift. I have heard that a woman's work is never done. Ladies, there will come a day when you serve your master for the last time. Pray it be far into the future, but it will come. When it does, do you really want to look back on any half-assed jobs? The very last time he tastes your cooking might be tonight. I'm the first to admit that in my house we often fall short of the perfect mealtime. We've had plenty of family meals in a vehicle, rolling down the highway, where the goal really is to just get some calories down our, and especially our kids' throats. Yet, it is so very important to aspire to aesthetic excellence in this and other everyday parts of life. Every walkabout, whether across town or to the end of the driveway, is an opportunity to practice one's posture and project grace and power into the world. Every task, be it at work or home, is an opportunity to improve upon the last performance. If your job involves filing TPS reports, it might seem easy to be disconnected and unconcerned with excellence, but there are other opportunities about such an office to cultivate excellence. Even putting pen to paper briefly to sign and date a form is an opportunity for beautiful calligraphy or a hurried mess of ink to be born. In my own life, the smaller hours of the morning contain many such opportunities. I exercise while everyone is still asleep. Every rep of every exercise has plenty of room for slouching, poor posture, or an incomplete range of motion. The temptation to just phone in the last couple of reps in a set is always there, but it would be a loss, a waste of time. What's the point of waking up at 4, getting set up for a workout, etc., just to half-ass some reps? Practice alone doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. So, when someone is living Gorean on earth, the manner in which one cultivates aesthetic excellence in one's life will very much depend on the circumstances of their life, but it is so very important not to give oneself excuses. To get back to the topic of slave gruel or food in general, I think it's wise to follow some sort of Gorean-inspired, primitive-type diet with a heavy emphasis on whole foods and avoiding processed foods. But an individual's diet obviously needs to be tailored to their needs. What is a Gorean diet? I don't know. A Mediterranean dish of lamb, unleavened bread, and olive oil seems rather more Gorean to me than a supersized combo number 5 from a certain fast food chain. But the Gorean cultures, based on ancient earth cultures, were diverse. It's a bit of a feeling thing, but eggs from our backyard quails seem much more Gorean to me than the eggs that come on an English muffin at the coffee shop. I suppose it's something that I'll know when I see it. But again, staying with whole foods rather than processed, and not eating too much of anything seems to be the right way to go for most people. In North America, where I'm recording this, most people, Gorean or otherwise, seem to be on the too much rather than the too little side of the dietary equation. So be honest with yourselves. Men, does your body shape exude power, competence, and a primal vigor at first glance? Or would a stranger dismiss you as someone who doesn't have it together physically? Girls, does your body demonstrate grace and the lithe, natural movement style of a lover of dancing? Or would a casual onlooker think your relationship with food and exercise is somewhat south of functional? There are excuses to be had, of course. We live in a culture that is quite obesogenic, and I don't just mean on the level of candy bars. Many people have unanswered trauma that the culture as a whole denies. We have bad habits around things other than food. We sit too much, drive too much, spend too much time focusing at a fixed distance, such as at a TV screen or a computer monitor, and reaching forward and down with our arms. Our bodies now bear this self-inflicted trauma in addition to whatever the world throws at us. Our ancestors, for the last 1,000 or so centuries, had to deal with many things, but too much junk food available around the clock was not among them. So of course, we need to develop new strategies to manage this novel challenge. Much more importantly, though, it is our culture that is sick. A few decades ago, public parks used to be filled with statues of leaders, heroes, geniuses, and great warriors, who both inspired us to greatness and looked down upon us with an admonishing eye. None of the men and women whose likenesses were carved or cast were perfect. In fact, they were better than perfect because they were real. Now those same parks have had all the statues removed by the most privileged and arrogant generation to have ever walked upon this planet, and the empty plinths are now surrounded by tents and sleeping bags, while humans who are completely zonked out of their minds on opiates writhe about in self-medicated agony. So it isn't hard to see that many people have lost sight of cultivating excellence of any sort, who are now buffeted about on winds of unbearable pain and numbing self-medication. These are the people who have every excuse. So how many excuses are you going to give yourself? Prince Harry wrote an entire book about how hard it was being Duke of Sussex. Every moment of your life is a chance for excellence or mediocrity. The condition of your domicile, the state of grooming and attire that you visit the world in, how you choose to show up. Some aspects are more forgiving than others. I can neglect some parts of personal grooming for a few days, and I merely look like a man wilder than I actually am. It's a privilege nature has granted me, but I try not to abuse it. In my Gorean household, we attempt an aesthetic practice of attractive opposites that, as a concept, I call silk and steel. I do my best to embody the steel side of life, and any woman in my collar is to cultivate the silk side. These are two different types of beauty, and we regularly fall short, but we remain mindful of these opposites in everything we do. As a brief aside, there is a pair of books written by a husband and wife called Man of Steel and Velvet and Fascinating Womanhood, respectively. These books, which were first published in the 60s and are somewhat reactionary against feminism, contain much of the same principles as what I call silk and steel, but in a less explicit, more conservative Christian-friendly format. I would recommend them to any couple. The cultivation of silk and steel in my household, in addition to being an aesthetic practice that is beautiful and enjoyable for its own sake, is also something I regard as a duty of ours as parents. There are plenty of confusing influences floating about Western culture these days that can really make a mess of a child's life, right around the age when he or she starts to think about what it means to be a man or a woman. Of course, our adult-oriented practices must be artfully hidden from our children, but it's very important to me that my children of both sexes see me fulfilling my role and their mother fulfilling hers in a graceful way. This cultivation of our masculine and feminine energies and presentations outwardly also attracts the sort of people we want in our lives and saves me needing to speak certain words out loud. The look on my face when the teachers at our children's school try to bring up some confusing nonsense about identity is enough to tell them to smarten up and cut it out. And my raised eyebrow on other topics saves me needing to explain that if any one of them tries to lead my child down some primrose path, it will earn them a K-bar between their ribs. What can I say? Looking mean has its upside. There is a large diaspora in my city of people from a certain part of India. The men are of a magnanimous and generous disposition. They sport dignified turbans, majestic beards, and all carry daggers. Let's just say they set a high bar. Nobody's going to try any nonsense with their kids, and I'm happy to count them among my allies in the silly culture war we are fighting. So embodying this practice takes many forms. For my part, in addition to the severe physical practices which border on the ascetic, and the maintenance of my dangerousness by way of practice and preparation, embodying the steel side is also a part of how I dress, how I speak, my posture, my gait, the gentle but firm warmth with which I treat people, but most of all, I try to embody it in the decisiveness of my actions, be they leisurely or enterprising. Chopping wood or chopping onions, I do so with purpose. Will I be eating these words someday, if my circumstances change? Maybe someday I'll be stricken by some horrible disease, or will be in some traumatic accident that substantially alters my capabilities. It will matter still that I conduct myself with as much dignity as I can muster, even if it is from a palliative care facility. To speak to how a girl who wears my collar cultivates the silk side, of course, I can only do so in the third person. Suffice to say that of her own accord, and encouraged and directed by me, She understands that her job is not to merely make it through the day, but to do so with grace, beauty, and the charmingly demure mode that is characteristic of her sex. Movements are to flow. The spirits of service and submission is to permeate every action, and her voice is to be shared as a welcome musical gift to anyone who hears it, excepting, of course, in the most private, carnal of circumstances. Whether in public or private, every movement, and especially our movements together, could take the form of an awkward, clumsy, disorganized mess, or could have the feel of a ballet, a tango, or a mating dance. Last year, a girl in my steel taught me a new verb, slaunter. It is, of course, a word that came from her imagination, a misapprehension of the word saunter, with an added predatory twist. Her lips may have meekly uttered, "Please stop slauntering at me," but every other molecule of her being wanted me to slaunter a little faster and carry her upstairs. This electricity need not be dynamoed out only in moments most anticipatory of a carnal union. The buckling in of children and loading of groceries in a Costco parking lot can be done awkwardly or gracefully, clumsily as the blind leading the blind, or as beautifully as a mated pair of eagles exchanging duties in the nest. This doesn't mean that everything we do needs to have a choreographed feel to it, or that we need waste our time living our lives in italics. We're not auditioning for Canada's Next Top Mime. It is really just a feeling, but it helps life feel wonderful. We endeavor to make silk and steel permeate all aspects of our personhood throughout the day. For example, in sartorial matters, I show myself to the world in a plain masculine style, being a man who frequently works out of doors and with my hands. Of course, I can suit up if needs be. I'm also accustomed to wearing a uniform. But you'll only catch me in sweatpants if I'm actually exercising. I give women in my steel many more options, but a lazy, slovenly appearance is not among them. A woman of mine in public is to emanate a certain energy and style, which rides the feminine tension perfectly between sensually expressive and modestly restrained. Perhaps most importantly, as a Gorean master in Kajira, one of the most important rituals is the asking and granting of permission. No, a girl of mine doesn't ask permission for every breath she takes, but she does genuinely ask for permission and seek direction for certain everyday things in life. Even for a mundane matter that for an ordinary couple would be a case of a wife informing her husband of her plans out of courtesy, my girl asks permission, and I have a genuine veto, if I should choose to use it. Of course, I very rarely veto, but she gracefully submits to this authority in matters great and small, which keeps her soul living peacefully in the palm of my hand, exactly where she wants to be. This asking of permission is one thing we're very much unabashed about, and she will do so in all social circumstances. I think I've drawn a fairly clear map of how I cultivate silk and steel in my life. For those listeners who practice a Gorean lifestyle of some sort, how important is this cultivation of opposites to you? Is Gore beautiful to you? For those listeners who may aspire to practice such a lifestyle, what areas of your life are lacking in beauty, and what are you doing about it? The old, the young, the handsome, the plain, the overweight, and the slim can all do things to live more beautifully, and with more gratitude for the marvelous age we now live in. I happen to think that beauty is a truth that transcends mere forensic truth. I have heard people tell me they don't care about beauty or aesthetics, but regardless of what they say, what I've seen from these same people is that they understand neither function nor form. Thanks for tuning in again and listening to me ramble on Gore as an aesthetic enterprise. In a future episode, we'll be looking at Gore as primarily a relational enterprise. But next week, we'll be taking a deeper dive into collars, particularly the collars I make. Yes, it's time for some shameless self-promotion. I look forward to speaking with you again. In the meantime, have a great week, live beautifully, and be well. See you in a week.